This week, we get to do a mashup of some great experts. We get to hear from Terri Cole, who wrote the book Boundary Boss, and she just came out with the book Too Much. We also get to hear from Stacey Womack from Arms Ministry, who has an amazing group that helps with domestic abuse recovery. And we get to hear from Dawn Dominguez, Windows of Hope, and her nonprofit counseling service. So let's enjoy our time and listen to these guys. So welcome, Terri Cole. I'm so glad you could be here.
Well, thanks, Terri Wolf. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Yes, great. Well, Terri, I always want to talk about how you got into this and how you mentioned that you went from a boundary disaster to a boundary master and how that's inspired your work. So give us the Cliff Notes.
Well, Cliff Notes is this. Nobody teaches us how to draw boundaries. So I was like everyone else who was raised to be a good girl. Turn that frown around. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. So most of us were taught that. So in my young life, I was really a people pleaser, looking for a lot of external validation. And it's funny, I didn't realize, I really thought when I started therapy, got into therapy in my 20s, I really thought it was everybody else. I was like, if those people would just get it together, everything would be fine. And of course, my therapist was eventually like, let me see, what is the common denominator in all of these situations? That would be you. So I learned that I even could draw boundaries by being in therapy. I didn't even know that was a possibility. I really thought it was all about going along to get along. And I was so caught up in wanting to be perceived as nice. I didn't want anyone to be mad. I didn't want anyone to be upset. And so I realized in my own career, once I became a psychotherapist, that obviously it wasn't just me who had those experiences. Then every one of my clients, no matter what their presenting problem was, we would just follow the dots backwards to the fact that they had no idea how to establish and enforce healthy boundaries in their relationships. So they were exhausted. They were burnt out. They were angry. They were overgiving, overfunctioning, overfeeling, doing all the things for all the people, but then feeling bitter. And I was like, oh, this is a boundary issue. And this crap is an epidemic.
It's really neat how you took your own experience, you grew, you recovered, and then you've helped people in that field. And now you're inspiring so many. That is really neat. So let's start with the basics. So what is a boundary?
Okay, so I'm going to have you look at your boundaries like your own personal rules of engagement, which means this is how we let other people know what's okay with us and what is not okay with us. So according to me, your boundaries are made up of your preferences, your desires, your limits, and your deal breakers. And your deal breakers, meaning your non-negotiables in relationships. Now, it's not enough just to know what they are, which I find a lot of women in particular do not even know their preferences, desires, limits, and deal breakers. But you have to know what they are and then have the ability to transparently communicate them when you so choose. So that's what boundaries are. What I think a really good question is why do we have no friggin' idea how to do it? Like, why?
Yeah. Where does that come from? I had no concept, no idea, and that it's healthy, and it's just changed my life. So why do we not know anything about this?
Well, so much of it is the way that we're raised. And we're raised in societies and family systems that it's less problematic for other people if we have bad boundaries. Then we're malleable, we're manipulatable, we are someone that doesn't cause a problem, so to speak. We don't have a big mouth, we're not voicing how we feel about things. And of course, in having disordered boundaries, you also have an unsatisfying life. So anyway, I just want to really impart that it's possible for you to change whatever situation you're in that doesn't work. And I guarantee you, learning how to become fluent in the language of boundaries is one of the ways that you're going to change that.
One thing you mentioned is the boundary hangover, which is so true. And I still struggle with that. I had to put a boundary up a few days ago, and I had that boundary hangover. So explain a boundary hangover and what your advice is to compensate for that.
Sure. Well, when you first start setting boundaries, especially if it's relatively new to you, it's already going to feel like everything feels like a big deal, which is why in the book, I give you all the scripts that you need. I give you a 4-step process to do it so that you're prepared. But what happens is when you actually draw the boundary, usually there's a part of you that really wants to take the boundary back. You feel guilty. you feel bad. We're doing a new action, especially if the other person is not thrilled with our boundary and that we're doing it. So what I say is that you have to have a 24 to 48 hour rule, which is that you're not going to take anything back and that you can self-soothe during that time. Be very kind to yourself. Stop ruminating about what you think that person's thinking and what they're doing. And I promise you, it's very unlikely that in 48 hours, you're going to want to take the boundary back. Right? Once we tolerate the beginning of the, ooh, am I being a bad girl? Or, ooh, is somebody going to be mad at me? Once we tolerate that feeling, because to change, we have to tolerate being uncomfortable. It's mandatory. Changing, breaking out of our comfort zone. This, Gay Hendricks talks about like the upper level limit in his book about, what's it called? Taking the Leap, where we can sabotage because we get uncomfortable with the newness or of the expansion. So if you're someone who's used to sort of putting up with crap from other people or taking other people's stuff, and you realize like you don't have to and you don't want to, in the beginning, it's going to feel very threatening to you to say something, to you to be like, yeah, no, this doesn't work for me. I don't want to do this, or I don't like that tone of voice. Please don't use it with me. Because here's the thing with setting boundaries, you guys, that I think I wrapped up the boundary hangover, meaning you're going to feel like you want to take it back. All I'm saying is don't take it back. Just give yourself 48 hours and then see how you feel. Because here's the thing, you can always take it back. But once you take it back, it's really hard to put it back in place.
So I asked you about that. I want to go back to, you mentioned, first of all, when you're becoming more of a boundary boss and just learning the language, you have to know what your own limits, deal breakers, all of that. That was a whole learning experience because I was so used to, caring more about what other people think and feel than how I think and feel. And then you said that you have to know it. Then you have to put it into a language for the other person. You have to have like kind of consequences or a boundary. So how do you put that? Give us some verbiage, some examples of how that would look.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the simplest way, especially for people just starting, let's do two things. Let's start with the first step on the path to becoming more fluent in the language of boundaries is stopping the auto yes. Because I think that a lot of us have been trained and raised, especially if you're religious households, to be very compliant, to do what other people want you to do, to not be a big mouth, to not make any trouble, So that means sort of going along to get along. And I think that we have to stop the auto yes if we're going to have healthy boundaries, because anything that you're doing automatically is not a conscious choice. So we have to sort of sit back, take a deep breath and realize, am I an auto yes person? When someone asks something, I'm like, sure, I'll figure it out. Or yeah, I can do it. So what we do is we just buy time. The first step is someone asks you to do something, you make a commitment for the next 7 days. You're not immediately agreeing to anything. For the next 7 days, someone asks you to do something for them. You go, hey, you know what? I need to get back to you on that. I want to check in with Mike. I want to check in with my partner. I want to check in with I have to look at my calendar and see if I'm free. You can also say, I have a 24-hour decision-making policy. I'll let you know tomorrow. I want to think about it, right? Like, why is it a crime for us to want to think about a decision? I feel like it shouldn't be. And I feel like it's not a crime, but you may not want to say that. You may just want to say, oh, hey, thank you so much for thinking of me. I'll get back to you on that. So you start to have a few of those little things in your back pocket. We have to be prepared. We have to get proactive. If you want to change the way you're relating to boundaries, we can't just leave it up to what we do in the moment, because what we do in the moment is our habitual reactions. So that's why being proactive is so important, where you're thinking ahead, like, oh, Betty at work always asks me to do crap I don't want to do, or always asks me to pick up the slack for her, and I don't want to. So I'm going to be prepared. The next time she asks me, I'm going to buy time. Be sure enough, Betty's going to ask you to do something you don't want to do. And instead of just agreeing, maybe like you've done in the past, you will immediately say, I actually need to look at my workload right now. I'm not sure that I can take that on, but I'll get back to you tomorrow on it. Super simple. We don't have to be aggressive. We don't have to be mad. We just got to be neutral and straightforward. Just say the words. I have to look at my workload. I'll let you know tomorrow whether I can help you out with that or not. So now we're preparing them for a no. And it's so much easier to say no when you haven't given an automatic yes, because you're not going to want to do that thing that you don't want to do from the moment you said you do it. The closer it gets, the more you don't want to do it. So a lot of times we'll suddenly get a quote unquote migraine, or, you know what I mean? Like, we should not have agreed to do the thing. And sometimes we can't even force ourselves to do the thing, and we find a way to get out of it. But it's not a straightforward way, right? And what what you're telling yourself by doing it that way is, I don't have a right to my preferences. And you know what, Tara? You know this as well as I do. You do have a right to your preferences, your desires, your limits, and your deal breakers, because yes, those are the things that make up your boundaries, but they're also the things that make you uniquely you. So they matter. So we've been indoctrinated into this, like you said before, like you were sort of always worried about what other people were thinking. You were indoctrinated into this, oh, I'm easy breezy, going along to get along, no fuss, no muss type of a vibe, with making the assumption that our preference, our desire, what we would like to do, is a burden to someone else. And it's not, because what you think, how you feel, what you want matters. And it needs to matter to you more than what anyone else wants, thinks, or feels. And many of us were taught to believe that that type of thinking would be selfish. And I promise you, I've been a psychotherapist for 27 years. It is not. It is not. It is healthy. And this is how we build healthy relationships. Because think about it. If you say yes when you want to say no, if you don't tell the truth about how you feel, or if you're upset about something, you are giving the people in your life corrupted information about who you are and how you feel. How are we going to be seen, heard, known if we do that? How can we ever be loved for who we are if we never let people know who we are?
One thing I talk about is how kind girls, we basically have a bullseye on our forehead that's for those boundary destroyers. Tell me what a boundary destroyer is, and how do we deal with that sort of personality or that sort of attribute?
Well, the way that I lay out the people that we deal with when it comes to boundaries is, we have our boundary first timers. So those are people we have relationships with, but maybe we haven't been honest with them about how we feel. Maybe we haven't told them we're upset about something, or maybe we haven't made a simple request to them. So that's a boundary first timer. Then we have the repeat offenders, where you have told them and they agree to do something different, but then they keep stepping over that boundary. And I always give an example of, like, you have a conversation with your partner to say, please let me know if you're going to be late. They say they will, and then they keep not letting you know that they're going to be late, which feels very disrespectful. It's very upsetting, whatever. That is a repeat offender. With a repeat offender, we eventually have to create some kind of a consequence for the continued behavior, because it's just like with children. It's like with anyone. If there's no consequence, where is the impetus to change the behavior, right? There's not that much inspiration to change the behavior if there is no consequence, if they continue. And then we have, I talk a little bit about boundary bullies, which are people who step over the line a lot, but all of them are not boundary destroyers. And so why we need to be aware of them is because you are exactly right. The empaths and the highly sensitive people, which I think a lot of the kind girls fall into those categories, I certainly did, will be just unbelievably attractive to the narcissistic personality type people, because we are perennial givers and they are perennial takers. What I teach you in the book, and what I'll tell you now, is that the most effective way to deal with boundary destroyers, and to even know that you're dealing with one, is to identify the ways in which they're manipulative. So let's talk about other ways that they manipulate those, so people can keep their eyes open for this. Yes. They may say to you, keep in mind, why is someone trying to manipulate anybody emotionally? It's to have power. The more power they have over you, the more power they want over you. They want to isolate you from your friends and family. They want you all to themselves, but they want to control you. They just want you to be pliable. They want you to shut up and do what they want you to do. They want you to feed their ego. They want you to have sex with them when they want to. They want everything. You know what I mean? So we need to look out. They'll try to, if you go up against them, or if you try to push back on something, they'll be like, are you okay? Like, I'm really worried about you. I mean, I wasn't going to say anything, but Bob also said that he thought you might be off the rails a little bit. Are you okay? So fake concern, right? Or faux concern. And what they're doing there, of course, is saying, it's not just me who thinks you're nuts. Now our friends think you're nuts too. So keep your eyes open for that little ditty. What other manipulation tactics do they do? Well, flipping the script, right? If you go to a narcissist or one of these personality types with a complaint, you will somehow end up apologizing,
Exactly. I would
right?
say
You
if you're
will,
the one 90% apologizing in a relationship,
yep,
red flag.
exactly. You're like, whoa. But it's funny how it happens that way. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I think you also have to really be mindful of how much of the time we blame ourselves for all the things. And the self-blame is also a way of, it's a bid for control, right? So we want to control the situation. And if we're the problem, we can do something about it. If they're the problem, we feel more, it's the same way that kids, you could be a kid in an abusive situation, and the kid will think, oh, if I just got better grades, maybe dad wouldn't drink, or if I just did this, maybe mom wouldn't hit me. And it's like, because the reality that that person who's supposed to protect you and love you is being bad to you is so painful. It's easier to be self-loathing than it is to admit the truth about what your situation is, you know?
You want to talk about that? A lot of this comes from originally, and you touched on this, the boundary blueprint.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where do we get these ideas and beliefs?
Yeah.
And how important is it to examine that boundary blueprint? So talk a little bit more about that.
Yes. In the book, Boundary Boss, I give you, I mean, this is really what we build our healing on. And it is, I want you to think about your blueprint, your downloaded boundary blueprint, as like a blueprint, for an architectural blueprint for a house that someone else designed like decades ago, maybe a century ago, where this gets handed down from generation to generation. So with boundaries, we learn this is the way you're supposed to be in relationships, right? This is how it is. This is the way marriages are. This is the way friendships are. This is the way. And so it's not just your family of origin, it's your family of origin, but then we're also influenced by country, culture of origin, the society that we grow up in, because there's different societal norms, whether you're middle class, whether you're from a more upper class, whether you're from a lower class, and families themselves have these unique familial norms of how we're supposed to behave. So what people don't understand is that that's not the only way it can be. But this stuff is very unconscious. So in the book, I walk you through questions so you can really look to go, how was my mother or the mother figure in your life? Once you're aware of what is in your downloaded blueprint, the notions, the limiting beliefs, whatever it is, you can change it.
So what I would call like a kind girl or my way of being, you really term like a high functional codependent. Could you tell me, like, how does somebody know they're a high functional codependent, and what are the challenge that creates?
Well, if you're very tired, if you're doing all the things for all the people, if you're constantly involved and worried about other people. I mean, my definition of high functioning codependency, we'll talk about codependency and then I'll tell you why I coined this phrase. Codependency is being overly invested in the feeling states, the outcomes, the relationships, the circumstances of the people in our lives to the detriment of our internal peace, right? Mm-hmm. So this is not, as lovers, as mothers, as friends, as caring people, of course, we care about the people we love, right? Of course, we're invested in their happiness. But when you're an HFC, a high-functioning codependent, you're overly invested. So even in sort of taking on the responsibility that you feel like it's on you to make those changes, it's on you to save that person from this bad decision they're making, right? It's on you to intervene or to, if they need money and they're going to get kicked out of their apartment, you're like, well, how can I let them get evicted? As if it's you letting them get evicted. So if any of that sounds where you feel like you're doing all the things for other people, you probably are a high functioning codependent. And the reason why I added the high functioning piece is because my clients, who are all very high functioning women, they did not identify with the old school definition of codependency, where it feels like it's only enabling an addict. You have to be involved with someone who's an alcoholic. You know, codependency, it seems so like weak, quote unquote. At least that's how they perceived it.
Yes.
And so it got in the way of me doing the work I needed to do with them because they couldn't see themselves in the definition of the thing that they definitely were. And I was like, oh, my people don't know what codependency is. This is what the problem is. So as soon as I added high functioning to it, they were like, the problem is me, for sure. Like nobody had a problem raising their hand after that because they understood what I was saying. Because another part of codependency that we don't talk about a lot is that so much of the time as codependents, we want to control other people. We do not want you making that mistake. We want to help you. We don't want you to be in pain. We don't want you to fail. We don't want you to get fired. We don't, all the things, but we overstep boundaries when we're high functioning codependents because we are so unclear about what is my side of the street and what is someone else's side of the street.
Thank you so much for your time, Terri. I so appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you so much for what you're doing in the world. I really appreciate you, Tara.
Are you a chronic people pleaser? Do you overgive, overfunction, pretty kind, and you're just tired, or maybe even a little bit resentful? Or are you wondering, like, wow, is this all to life? Is this how it works? Because I kind of feel like I'm going through the motions. Well, that's what the Unravel Notebook is for. It's 61 days to unravel our thinking, beliefs, and live a life intentionally as we connect closer with God, ourselves, and others, so we can be more confident and live brighter in this world. So today I have Stacey Womack here, and she is founder and executive director for Abuse Recovery Ministry Services, ARMS, and she uses more than her 26 years of experience to educate, inform, and inspire leaders to better care for domestic violence victims and abusers through her debut book, On the Front Lines of Abuse, Strategies for the Faith Community. Her new book equips the faith community to address domestic abuse in a God-honoring way. In her book, she shares stories and practical advice based on years of experience. Welcome, Stacey.
Thank you.
It's so great to have you here.
I'm very excited to be here too.
So in your book, you talk about this difference between, kind of broke down different abuses, and you talk about spiritual abuse. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. A lot of people don't think about abuse in spiritual terms. In fact, there's just a few categories, and we have 8 categories of abuse that we talk about. But spiritual abuse is the misuse of scripture. An abuser may use the misuse of scripture, or even the faith community does. So sometimes misuses scriptures to get the victim to comply. And I call her a victim at this point because at this point she's still in the abuse. So it could be questioning her salvation, her theology, telling her that God doesn't love her. It's just, when you mix faith and abuse, it just does terrible things to people. I have so many horror stories of things that pastors have said because they haven't been educated around this issue. And I have so many women say, Stacey, I love God, but I hate church because of what that's happened. But, I even had a man who just was totally verbally abused his wife and then wanted to pray with her and thank God for what a wonderful wife he'd given him. And it was like that psychological abuse mixed in with that spiritual abuse is just really devastating.
Yes. That was my experience. And a number of people that we all came from a similar church with a similar theology and teachings. And a number of those gals that got out of those relationships feel exactly like you mentioned, Stacey, where some of them actually don't even have a relationship with God anymore because it is so destructive to their view of God to have something like that happen and have the church, address it because they're not aware of how to do it differently. Mm-hmm. And
right.
Yeah. And that your book was so good about explaining that and, explaining the difference, and it was really good. So let's talk about that. A lot of times, a couple will go to the church for counseling. Talk about the challenges with that when it's an abusive relationship and how that gets distinguished or missed.
Well, and I first want to say to anybody who's listening that it's totally normal to do this, to go to counseling. Everybody wants their relationships to work. So nobody gets into a relationship for it not to work. So we try everything. Unfortunately, couples counseling does not work when abuse is the issue because it's not like normal marriage conflict. It's about one person using a pattern of behaviors to gain power and control over their intimate partner. And so it's not about them coming to this counseling session where it's 50-50 and they've got to she's 50% responsible for his abuse then. Mm-hmm. It's like, what did you do to cause it kind of thing? And when really it's about, no, we need to separate the two and we need to work with them individually. She needs to get some healing. He needs to be addressed from this accountability side of how to gain some new belief systems that will help him to love like Christ loves. And honestly, when the guys do the very hard work with the guys who really work it hard and the relationships are able to make it, they don't even need couples counseling after that because really that's all that was needed. So if they go to couples counseling, it actually puts her in danger because if she's sharing the secrets that he doesn't want shared and now, they go home and they're alone, who's there for her to protect her? Or he may use all the information the counselor uses against her. Mm-hmm. So they're again, I have so many horror stories about counselors who are well-meaning counselors who just totally mishandled this issue so poorly. And, I really, it just breaks my heart. Because like you said, for some women, where it should have been safe wasn't safe. And we find that when the women go through her journey, often in a church is where we hold them. Churches, it's not the only place we hold them, but it's a lot of our groups are there. They find a safe place within that group, and they find a way to re-engage them with the church again. And I know even for my sister, it's been a really hard go. She hasn't walked away from her faith, but not really that engagement with church just because of her concerns over doing the very thing that we were taught when we were growing up you never do, right? Which is to divorce, which is,
Yes.
I get it. I get it. Yeah, I know, like the worst one in the Bible. So when the reality is that studies have been done on those scriptures that are used against women to get them to stay, about God hates divorce, there's so much more to that verse than what they're sharing, and who it's to, who it's addressed to, what the meaning actually means. That we actually have some really great articles on our website about that as well, but there's just some really better explanations. And being a pastor kid myself, it's been an interesting journey to navigate this, because of course God doesn't want divorce, marriages to end, but God would never sacrifice a person for the sake of a relationship. And, I really, there's scriptures in the Bible talks about the prudent man or woman sees danger and hides. There are appropriate times to actually separate and hide, and separate so that you can get some healing. In these situations that are domestic violence or domestic abuse related, even if it's not physical, but it's the other forms of abuse that are still bringing death to that person, separations are very functional. And our heart isn't for divorce. We would love to see every couple make it. We just can't make anybody do that, right? The abuser has to choose to change.
Yes.
We can present the information, and they have to choose what they're going to do with it. So we talk with the women about keeping their focus on God and not on what he is or isn't doing, and not putting her hope in him changing, but her hope in God, because that is only the most firm and sure place that she can be. He is our anchor. God is our anchor, no matter what happens. And we all need to know that he's enough for us, that God's enough for us no matter what.
Mm-hmm. That was another surprise in your book. So not only did you say, couples counseling, not ideal. You also said separation is not only, it's healthy, it's important, and a great part of the journey that you guys use and part of the process. And it makes such sense, because then the victim is safe, and then you can deal with both of them. And I thought that was fabulous insight, and just from the experiences worked really well. I think one of the hardest things for me is there wasn't the physical abuse, and there was the psychological and spiritual. And I thought that was interesting how you addressed psychological abuse, or basically you talked about like the soul dying. And mine got so bad where I ended up in the psych ward, which is interesting as you refer to mental challenges with abuse. So that's really interesting. So why don't you first talk about psychological abuse, right, and how that can be kind of hard if there's not the physical abuse, to really understand that it is abuse.
Yeah, psychological abuse is the number one form of abuse used, and all forms of abuse are psychological because they have an emotional impact on the person.
Yes.
And it is the hardest to identify because it looks like normal marital conflict, but it really is not. So crazy making, mental coercion, gaslighting, whatever you want to call it, is usually the number one thing that is done. And it kind of eats away at the person's confidence and sense of self. So this is, again, a way to, like you mentioned, we talk about it killing the soul, the mind, the will, and the emotions. So I use the analogy of standing at the ocean's edge. If you've ever done that, and the water laps at your feet and it pulls the sand out from underneath your feet. And if you don't move, you'll fall. So you do move, and then you move again, and then you move again. So that's what psychological abuse is like. You're doing that. You're trying to please the other person. You keep adjusting. And before long, you begin to wonder, okay, maybe I am the bad one here. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe I am the abuser. So you begin to question yourself, and you lose your sense of identity.
Yes. One thing I really like about your program is that you also address the abusers. You have a program for them. And that's fabulous. Speak more into that, because I think sometimes it's not intentional. It's, what they learned, and it's just very abusive. And so. Yeah.
I mean, not just women, but men also have a very narrow view of what abuse is. Mm-hmm. And so most of our men come to us thinking, no, I'm not abusive. I've never hit her, oh, I only pushed her that one time, something, something to that effect. And they come in and we go through all the types of abuse. Every time we have a new member join a group, we go through all the types of abuse, and they're like shocked, to hear this information. And it's like, power control works for them. So there is some payoff to using power and control. Obviously, otherwise no one would be using abuse, right? So, but a lot of our guys are like, they didn't recognize it as abuse. They didn't see it as abuse. And most abusers see themselves as the victim, where most victims wouldn't even use that word to describe themselves.
So true.
Especially if they've never been hit. So,
yes.
Yeah. So it's really an interesting dynamic that goes on there. But I feel it's really important for us to work with those who use abuse. And we have a class for men and women, 2 different separate groups, to help them gain new belief systems while addressing the old belief systems and what gave them permission to be abusive in the past. And to really look deeply at that. If they have their own childhood trauma, which most of our clients do, we encourage them to do counseling just for that, not for their relationship issues, but for their childhood trauma. Because some studies show that men who don't deal with their childhood trauma aren't able to sustain change.
Thank you for the work that you're doing. I'm super excited about your book and also your services and just how it's amazing what you're doing, Stacey. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you. I so appreciate it.
Happy holidays. I wanted to make your season a little brighter and lighter. And so I'm offering 2 things for free. One is a relaxing meditation, and the other one is the BARF notebook. And that is the system for working through our feelings and our thoughts by barfing them out, sorting them out, and planning them out. Those are both for free on the website at livebrighter.info. So go ahead and go there and pick up your free gift to help support you this holiday season. And live brighter every day. Make it a great day. So today with Live Brighter with Tara, we have a special guest. It's Dawn Dominguez. She is the founder of Windows of Hope, which is a nonprofit counseling service. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist, and she specializes in couples and relationships. So Dawn, welcome to Live Brighter with Tara.
Thank you for having me.
And then you started the nonprofit Windows of Hope in 2006. And it's really neat about this nonprofit because you have clients on a sliding scale. First of all, where are you located? I know you meet with people Zoom, but then explain more about Windows of Hope.
Windows of Hope is a nonprofit counseling center. A lot of the reason why I started that, I now that I look back, is I really wanted to practice the way I wanted to practice. And I started to get into, I met Harville Hendricks, who is the founder of Imago Relationship Therapy. And I found anywhere that I wanted to work, people wanted me to do it their way. And I wanted to offer the community, everyone, whoever, whether you have insurance or you don't have insurance, or you just need to process something, that you could find us and then have affordable counseling so that everyone would have somebody to talk to and connect with at that level. And that was the whole beginning of Windows of Hope, was I could practice more depth therapy the way I wanted to do it. And then also I could offer affordable counseling to whoever, because a lot of people couldn't find therapy. Their insurance didn't cover it. I don't have insurance that cover that at all. I don't have anyone to talk to about these things that are really troubling us. So that was really the start of it.
That's huge. That's a very big deal, because a lot of people, I would say the people that I talk to that want to go to therapy and don't, they say, well, it costs so much. Yeah. And so to know that there's options and how important it is, and then describe what depth therapy is. Tell me a little bit more about that.
What we do is a lot of deeper connected trauma work. So what we do, all anything that people bring forward. But what depth therapy means more is I can bring the couple together. They can see what's really triggering them in the relationship. And then we can find out what the source was. Because a lot of times we think it's our partner. And in reality, there's more to it. I am all the things that I was up until now. I'm the little girl who was in foster care. I'm the young woman who ran away. I'm the young woman who started school by herself with a frying pan and $20 and no support. No one in my family went to university, so I had to figure it out on my own and make that happen. And to really rely on everything that they've taught me along the way. So when I met my husband and I connect with my husband, I'm all of those people So he could behave in a certain way and open up something that maybe happened when I was little. And I can help couples find that. And we can actually feel the original trauma, hopefully through the relationship, which is
That's
beautiful.
huge.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, traumas do, unresolved traumas, it's amazing how they do impact us and our relationships.
Yeah. The way I describe it is if I have a burn here on this hand and I don't have a burn here and I blow on this burn, it hurts. If I blow on this hand, it doesn't hurt. Same blow.
Mm-hmm.
I brought that burn with me to my relationship. Now, maybe I can own my own feelings and where that came from, but also maybe my partner can learn how to be with me and know that I have a burn there and he can be more careful, right? Or I could be more careful with his. And that's the idea, is to find those things that came with us.
You experienced your own religious abuse in relationship and just in the community. How did you overcome it, and how do you help others?
Yeah, I think in religious abuse can be defined in a lot of different ways, right? And some of us don't even know that it has happened to us.
Yes.
Some of it is explicit and it's obvious, right? It can happen sexually, it can happen in controlling ways, and it can happen physically, like with physical abuse as well. There's other types of abuse, and it's manipulation, right? And I guess at the basic level for me, I overcame and found my own power internally. But what I found was I was being led externally rather than internally. And so there was fear instilled in, we need to behave a certain way and we need to marry a certain way. And what ended up happening for me is that I had to leave my fiance at the time to follow the religion. There were guidelines and certain manipulative tactics that I felt were being used, not by the religion itself, but maybe some of the members of that religion, because we wouldn't want to discount a religion, but some of the members and some of the people in my life using control and manipulation to guide me. How I overcame that is by finding, again, my internal source, because my internal source in my guide is inside of me. And I can communicate directly with myself and with any other entity I choose to follow, and connect to that and find my way.
Right. Yeah. Well, I feel like God is, or source, or however, is talking to us all the time. And then if we're along with Christian theories, then the Holy Spirit's in us. And so I feel like we do need to look within us, and God is talking to us. So yeah, I definitely see what you're saying.
Yeah. And if anybody knows about Virginia Satir, we'll bring it into that a little bit. In the humanistic theory, her name was Virginia Satir, and she wrote a book called The New People Making. And she talked about a thing called internal locus of control and external locus of control. What I have found is that a lot of the religions are choosing external locus of control. I have to look outside of myself for the answers, when in reality, it's Holy Ghost speaks to me through my body inside of me, not through somebody else, right?
Yeah. And that's where we talk a lot as a kind girl, because as a recovering overly kind person, I was constantly over serving and always looking for the external validation and this and that. It was very externally focused, as I'm trying to love others constantly and then not loving myself or being kind to myself. So it was definitely an external focus.
Yeah. I'd like to invite in, do you know who Gabor Mate is?
I've heard of him.
Okay, I'm in his 1-year compassionate inquiry thing. It's beautiful. If anybody's interested, it's great. I've been doing it here. But one of the things he talks about is saying yes every day and saying no every day. And
yes.
Right? Where in my life am I not saying no for me or saying yes for me? And how is it impacting me? Right? Our immune system and our emotional system are the same system. So,
and that's huge.
Right? That's impacting my whole physical being when I'm not listening to myself.
Right. So when we're not being authentic to ourselves and we're saying yes and no, when that's not what we authentically mean or feel, it's compromising our immune system and our whole system.
Yes. This is so cool that this is, because this is all part of the whole thing. Because in December, when I very first heard him speaking and I took that in and I really started practicing, where am I not saying no in my life today? where am I not saying, and how is it impacting me? I was becoming so sick physically. I had a whole immune disorder. I still do. And I've gained 10 pounds. I'm getting healthy. And it's because I'm learning to say no and learning how to say yes. Even further, even more than all these years, like into my 55th year, like I'm getting stronger even still. Like there's always time to learn and grow.
I'm relying so much more on my body than my mind. I had a experience just recently where I was with someone that is, abusive in a lot of ways. And my mind kept wanting to justify it. And both times I was around him, I got COVID. My immune system just like, blah, blah, blah. And I got super, like, I haven't been that sick in ages. And both times I got super sick and then basically connected the dots a little bit later. But it's very interesting, like how our bodies, have much more wisdom. I mean, our brains can only, as far as cognitively, only remember about the 10% or whatever, but our body knows all of that. Our subconscious does in our body. So it's very interesting.
Yeah. And I work that into the couples work as well. And that's, I guess we'll go back to the depth question.
Yes.
That's really what I'm talking about, because I could be responding to something that my brain might be picking up from way back when. The reptilian brain at the back at the top of the brainstem doesn't know time and it doesn't know direction. And so it doesn't know I'm not 5 years old. It doesn't know I'm not 7 years old. It doesn't know I'm not 10. It doesn't know I'm not 15. That part of the brain doesn't know that. And so if it picks up on a pattern or sees something, I might assign to my own husband something that happened when I was really little. So if I could somehow in the process, I have ways I do this now because I've been taught, but to help the couple find that and unhook their partner from that and actually heal that part, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then actually go to the place where we need to go.
And then you did your healing work. You got a divorce and you're now remarried and it's been wonderful. And so you've got this great passion for relationships and couples and all of that. So I think that's really neat.
It's really, I'll share with you. I met my husband when I was 15 years old. He was 14 years old at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. Okay.
Wow.
I landed in the meeting on a field trip and he was there. He's been sober for many years now, but he was chasing sobriety a bit. Anyway, so we were engaged and I left to go to school and became religious at that time. But when I came back, he was sober. We did end up getting married after all that time, 20 something.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. And so we have all this history around all of that kind of stuff. And it's really neat because we're healing a lot that happened back then. We're healing what's happening now. But what's beautiful about it is that we did find our way back. And what she invited back to my couples work, and this is very important, is the romance.
Oh.
All those years I was like, I made it was very structured and it's still in the process. We still saved a lot of marriages, and relationships and families and everything, but it wasn't romantic focused. And what he invited back into my life was romance and deep love and magic in the couple.
I can so relate. I'm like, wow, I have intimacy and love and like romance. Yeah, that was something that was not really in my life before.
Oh, no, because it's very like, this is what we're supposed to do.
Do the job.
This is what we're supposed to do. I'm doing this because so I talk about get to relationships in my office, not have tos.
Oh, tell us more about that.
Yeah, because have to is, this is my structure. This is what I'm supposed to do. There's rules. It's rigid. This is what I need to do, which is what I was caught up in. That was my marriage. And the marriages we're creating is, I get to be with you. I get to have this argument with you right now because you matter to me and I feel passionate about you. And hey, I'm going to learn a better way to do it, but that's beautiful. And my person is a get to person. He's the get to of the day. And we want to create that. We want to create a get to experience.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Nothing's a have to.
That's so, Mike and I will say to each other, I choose you today. It's like we choose. We're not obligated. I'm not stuck. Because I mean, coming from my past, I really struggled with that. I'm like, I'm there, start feeling suffocated by the thought.
It's true, right? Like we feel stuck. And we don't want to ever feel like, I don't ever want to feel like I'm a have to for him. I want to get to.
We also talk about like my passion for just creating freedom for women in general. And that's a key for you as well. Tell me more about, we've touched on a little bit, but let's talk about more about creating freedom.
Yes, I want to talk. I love that. I love that concept. I've written papers on freedom because I think it's really important. So freedom is found when we exercise our ability to choose, right? That's when ultimate freedom is found. If we lose choice, we lose freedom, 100%, even if it's manipulative choice taken. everybody has a different ability to choose based on their experience of their life and the crime that they've been through, whatever pain, whatever trauma, whatever crimes, whatever situations they've been through, even if they're the ones committing the crime. So in that space, our freedom can be altered based on our lack of choice. Okay? So we want to increase choice and we want to increase freedom in that space, right? So
Yeah.
the more we are able to know we have choice, to visit our traumas, clear them out, and make shifts there, understand ourselves better, the more we'll be able to have that freedom that we're looking for, right? As women and
Yes.
men too, but women
Yes.
too. If we're talking about women specifically, the way to find that freedom is to know we have choice. That's my thought on it. To unhook any of the unhook any kind of painful, how would we want to put that? Maybe forgiveness of some kind, but not forgiveness in the sense of true, like the way we hear about it, but more acceptance focused, right? So we learn to accept whatever has happened and be with it and learn from it and allow whatever learning that came, whatever gift came from it.
Well, thank you so much, Dawn. Is there any last words you'd like to give to anyone from Live Brighter?
Yeah, just behind every complaint is a wish. So if you ever find yourself feeling a frustration or a complaint, probably there's a wish behind it to find, and some hope for growth and healing and moving through the trauma onto the other side. So that's the only thing I was thinking of. That might be important to say. Yeah.
That's great. I love it. Thank you so much, Dawn.
Thank you. Thank you.